these are just hypotheses, and I think you need to come up with some hypotheses when even the physicists don't have any kind of explanation for, and they don't even offer an explanation as to what might be going on. Generally, when a physicist is asked what is it that it's being seen when people describe Tic Tac UFOs, I think they look a little bit like that, if I'm not mistaken. Not a very good looking Tic Tac, but I think it's a bit more polished than that, the ones that were seen by David Fravor. But when the physicists are asked what these things might be, they just say, well, we don't know. We don't know what they are. They're just unidentified objects in the sky. And I think that's not good enough. I think we need to start maybe brainstorming ideas as to what these things might be. And here's one. What I'm going to do is let's just create a world here. It's the surface of the Earth here. The atmosphere is above it. Now, what you could do, if you're a government or maybe a private defense company and you're off the bent that perhaps you could create things in the sky that might spook your adversaries, one thing you could do is to create nanobots. So we don't know that nanobots exist as yet. We certainly know that nanoparticles exist. And these are particles that are really, 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 really small, hence nano. Now, there has been talk in the past that you could potentially create nanobots, which are programmable from nanoparticles. Okay, so if you could create nanobots that can be programmed from a distance, what you could do is to fill the sky with lots and lots and lots of nanobots. You could have so many nanobots up in the sky and still not see anything in the sky because they are really, 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 really small. They're invisible even to a lot of microscopes. Okay, so you get a lot of nanobots in the sky. Now, if you could program them to suddenly coalesce or condense in one area to create something that looks, say, a bit like a Tic Tac. Gosh, I think that Tic Tac might be slightly better than that one. But anyway, now you wouldn't need an awful lot of nanoparticles, or rather you would need a lot of nanoparticles, but you wouldn't need so many nanoparticles to create a solid Tic Tac. You could just create the shell of a Tic Tac, maybe a couple of atoms thick, by coalescing a lot of nanoparticles into one Tic Tac shaped shell. Now, there'd still be nanoparticles in the sky, but they'd be the ones that are distant, not taking part in this condensation. Now, a second later, or a split second later, you could have them disperse again in that area, and then in another area just adjacent to it, the nanoparticles in that area could coalesce and form a Tic Tac shape and leave a sparsity of nanoparticles in that area. So an instant before, it was in this part here, the nanoparticles forming that shell dispersed, and the particles in the next part of the sky condensed to form a shell. And that's this here. And an instant later, the same thing happens again, where the nanoparticles that formed this shell disperse again, and suddenly the ones in the next part of the sky coalesce and leave a paucity of nanoparticles in that part of the sky, just momentarily. Now you can see that by sequentially condensing and dispersing the nanoparticles in adjacent parts of the sky, you can give rise to the impression of something moving across the sky. And this could happen really, really quickly if you had everything programmed in the right way to condense and coalesce. And I think that this could certainly give rise to visible abnormalities because, you can have light shining off of this, any light that's in the sky at the time, ambient light, sunlight, or whatever could bounce off this, strike your eye, and you would see it. And it would appear to you as though this thing is moving very rapidly across the sky. And you could program this to appear as if it's making such rapid movement across the sky, maybe supersonic speeds, and you would get no sonic boom because there isn't actually anything moving across the sky. It's a little bit like a Mexican wave. What is a Mexican wave? It's really a change in the state of particles that occurs sequentially around a stadium. And those particles are, of course, the arms of the whatever it is that you call people that watch football. Can't think of the word, but it doesn't matter. I don't watch football. I find it boring. Anyway, but it's a change in the position of people's hands from being here to being here. So it's like a little oscillation that goes up and down before the next hand goes. So this one goes up and down, then this one goes up and down after that one's gone down. So it looks from a distance, if you didn't know that there were people in this stadium, if you were looking from the moon, you would see something that moves around the stadium. And you could, if you wanted to, make it move or appear to move faster than the speed of light. It could go really, really, really fast just by programming the individuals to get up and sit down at exactly the right time to make this wave appear to move around the stadium faster than the speed of light. Now, I think you can do the same thing with this mechanism here. I think you can make this Tic Tac appear to move across the sky, possibly even into space, depending on how many and how extensive your distribution of nanoparticles stroke nanobots is. Make it move across the sky, make it look as though it's making 90-degree or 180-degree turns, and make it move back and forth, back and forth, back and forth over the ocean. So that's, I think, one way, which is basically the nanobot method. Now, could some large defense company in one of the advanced democracies or non-democracies have access to nanobots now? And could that be kept secret? I think it's not out of the question. And I think it's certainly something that we need to just bear in mind could happen. So that's my first theory. Now, one extension of this is if these nanobots could be created on Earth, used on Earth in this fashion, of course, they could be made into all kinds of shapes. You could make black triangles appear to move across the sky. You could even make them look like cubes that are encased by a ball. And certainly these objects have been spotted, apparently, by Navy pilots and so on around the world, especially around the US, which is actually one thing that makes me wonder whether this is actually a technology owned by something military-industrial complex or something. So I think that's a possibility. Now, if these things were not human-made, but alien-made, if you like, they could be coming in from a different direction. So let me explain. What we've got here is a two-dimensional setup. It's not really two-dimensional because, of course, it's got a three-dimensional thickness, which is the thickness of this piece of paper. But it's a very thin three-dimensional structure, and for all intents and purposes, two-dimensional. Now, as a three-dimensional person, if I was looking at, let me pick up this two-dimensional world here. If I was to pick it up, from a distance, I could fire small particles through this two-dimensional atmosphere, which is this, which if this is the Earth here, that's the atmosphere. I could fire nanoparticles through this two-dimensional atmosphere, again in such a way that it appears as if a tic-tac shaped shell is moving across a two-dimensional person's sky. So this two-dimensional character here is going to see this thing moving across the sky and going back and forth, doing funny maneuvers and disappearing off into the sky. And I think that's another possibility, but of course, I have other theories as to how a four-dimensional creature could interact with our three-dimensional world the way that I'm explaining a three-dimensional person like me could interact with this two-dimensional world. Okay, I'm going to save that for the next video because I've got quite a lot more to say about it. And if you want to hear all of that, subscribe to the channel. Put a like on this and comment on it if you're interested in this kind of thing, because I certainly am. I'm very much intrigued. I do have lots of ideas, which may or may not be rubbish. Who knows? We can't prove this until we actually have one of these in our hands, or until we know what the major military powers are up to. Now, it's not to say that I necessarily think that they should give up these secrets. I think that for somebody like me to say that these things should be made public knowledge, I think, you can say that if you have access to all the intelligence that the intelligence services have. But I think without that, I would be very reluctant, indeed frightened, I think, to expose these technologies to the world, because who knows what's going on in the intelligence world. Okay, over and out for now. Take care. Bye bye.